Ayy, look, yeah, ayy. I'm in the lab like Dexter, brand new batch he tested. I'm with all the extras, don't try and bitch, I'm pressure. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers.
But let's go ahead and stay on the topic of the Miami Dolphins, and I'll go ahead and just say this question outright. Should the Miami Dolphins be considered as Super Bowl contenders?
No, just because I think
Hell no. You tripping.
And also, what's it called? If you guys don't know, the Dolphins have the third hardest schedule in the entire NFL. So it goes to Patriots. I think it's Patriots, some other team, and then the Dolphins. They have the Patriots, the Raiders, and the Dolphins. So the Dolphins have the third hardest schedule in the entire NFL. On top of what I've already mentioned about Tua, and people are gonna sit here and say, well, he had concussions. In those games that he was having a concussion, a lot of times he was not facing those. He was not playing elite defenses when he was sitting out because of a concussion. There were games that he was missed, that he was not able to face units that were top 10. I think there were a couple of 2 or 3 teams where they were finished top 10 in DVOA. They're one of the better defensive teams in the NFL, and Tua didn't get to see them. And so we saw games against the Chargers where Tua didn't look good. We saw games against the Niners. The Packers game, again, people are going to say, well, he had a concussion. I don't believe he had a concussion. First half, he was playing like Tua. In the second half, if you've seen the type of throws that Tua was attempting to do, that is not somebody who had a concussion. That was a normal human being who just made erroneous decisions. And so I feel like those last 4 or 5 games where Tua played were teams adjusting towards Tua. And so I don't view this team as a Super Bowl contender. I don't think Tua can elevate this roster to a Super Bowl contender. I think the guy, again, people are going to sit here and say, well, we saw how his stats looked last season. Again, I feel like there are a lot of those games he was not playing against top 10 defenses. He did not play against the best of the best. And so we saw him against the Niners. We saw him against the Bills. We saw him in these different type of games where I feel like Tua cannot match up with the type of quarterback that's opposite from him. And so when I see a guy who I believe has one of the weaker arms in the entire NFL, he has good placement, but his arm strength isn't up there. I think it's, bottom 5 in the league amongst starting quarterbacks. A guy who needs to be schemed into a good offense. I just don't believe that this team can be a Super Bowl contender. Now with Jalen Ramsey out to December, he's going to take time to get back. I don't think that they're going to get – I think they're going to be the odd man out in this division, not counting the Patriots.
To say Super Bowl contenders immediately, I feel like it's a little too much. I feel like they got to – we just talked about the Ravens and Lamar, taking that next step forward to making the Super Bowl. I feel like the Dolphins have to make that next step as well. They got to get a little playoff win. They got to get playoff atmosphere is different. Just to say immediately once they step foot into that playoffs, they're going to perform and make it to the Super Bowl. I don't know. That's going to be tough. It's a whole.
Are we going to say they're Super Bowl or bust? Can we say that about them too?
Not even close. Not even.
Why
close.
not? Why not? He has probably the best combination of weapons in front of him with a great offensive play calling. Why isn't it Super Bowl or bust for Tua now too?
We don't compare Tua and Lamar Jackson. We don't keep them on the same pedestal.
Why not?
One is an MVP and one is not. The level of talent, the talent gap is massive.
Tua has weapons in front of him. If we're gonna view it, he's a young quarterback. He's in this supposed tier.
Has Tua won an MVP like before? Like
nope,
unanimously?
Nope,
no, he's not. He's never had a season close to Lamar Jackson's MVP season. Like the way we talk about Tua isn't the same as the way we talk about Lamar Jackson. That's why it can't be a Super Bowl or bust type of discussion.
Is it because of Tua? Is it because of Tua himself? Is that why?
It is because of Tua himself, but it's also because of the situation that he's been put in. Obviously, the talent gap is massive between the two guys. Number one, and then number two, the situations that they're both in. Tua, he wasn't on a good team to start off his career, and he wasn't even the starter. But Lamar Jackson, the weapons weren't necessarily the greatest, but obviously he has an elite defense. It's just two different situations when you compare the two guys, and the talent is the number one factor in comparing both these guys.
Yeah, but at the same time, for me, I feel like, they got to wet their feet in the playoffs, get a couple wins under their back, and then we could talk about them being Super Bowl contenders. Obviously, they have a fantastic team, but that playoff atmosphere is different. They're a good team, though.
I mean, I think it's pretty simple. I think just say you guys don't believe in Tua, and then kind of.
It's not about believing in Tua. It's not about
after that.
It's not about believing.
Oh yeah, I'll go ahead and tell you that. I'll go ahead and tell you that.
There's no need to like beat around the bush, right? Like if you guys don't believe in Tua, it's the same thing as last year.
100%. I don't
like. You said Super Bowl contenders. You said Super Bowl contenders, and for me, that's AFC. It's Chiefs. It's what's his face? Cincinnati.
Bengals.
And then there you go with Josh Allen as that third team, the Bills. I mean, we're talking about Super Bowl. It's not Tua. It's the full team of the Miami Dolphins. And I don't think they're able to compete with those two top teams. Then they're still a little step off from competing with the Bills.
Bro, I just believe there's a massive quarterback differential between these top AFC. Like when you look at these AFC quarterbacks, you have Josh Allen, you have Patrick Mahomes, you have Joe Burrow, you have Trevor Lawrence, you have Lamar Jackson, you have Aaron Rodgers, like Justin Herbert. There is a massive gap between those guys and Tua. That's for me the biggest differential. What I believe, because if you saw any single one of those 7 quarterbacks into that Dolphins offense with those 2 wide receivers, we're sitting here talking about that team has to win the Super Bowl. But because I view Tua as a quarterback who is not in that tier, and I don't think he'll ever break that tier. I think he's just in that Daniel Jones level of quarterback, that tier of quarterbacks, maybe the Geno Smiths of the world. That type of tier of quarterbacks. That's why I cannot view him as a Super Bowl contender. Plain and simple.
You gonna add anything to that, Big H? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Number one.
I'm not agreeing with the quarterback situation. Just for me, as a contender, Super Bowl contender, I just think those 3 teams are much better.
It's not about the other teams being much better. It's just whether or not they're built to be a Super Bowl contender, and I think they have the roster to be a Super Bowl contender. Number one, before I jump into all of that, we talked about a little bit about Tua in that Green Bay Packers game. Let me pull up his numbers before he suffered a concussion in comparison to after he suffered a concussion. Pre-concussion, 9 for 12, 229 passing yards, 19.1 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions. Post-concussion, 7 for 13, 81 yards, 6.2 yards per attempt, 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. You cannot sit here and tell me that that Tua before the concussion is the same player he was after the concussion.
Maybe just maybe there's this concept called adjustment. Maybe there's
every team makes adjustments.
It's a possibility they made adjustments to Tua. They understand what his strengths and his weaknesses are.
There's no way Tua has that bad of a fall off.
Yes,
in his play.
It's possible. It's very
having
much
a concussion.
Yes, it's very much possible.
The play he even suffered a concussion on it's on. Everybody can find it if you look it up on the internet. It's obvious where he suffered the concussion, and then where everything went south.
It's very much possible that Tua simply got the teams adjusted towards him, that they took away his strengths. It's a very much possibility. We're not sitting here talking about Tua like he's an elite quarterback. He can be adjusted towards. It's not like you're adjusting towards a Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. It's Tua. We're not sitting here just because of the 2 weapons that he has. It's so shocking that Tua had a fall off. That it must mean that he has a concussion. It could just mean the fact that teams adjusted towards him and they understand how to stop that Dolphins offense. Now, do I say that they can consistently stop it? No, because those are 2 of the most explosive wide receivers in the NFL. But they know what Tua's strengths are and they know what his weaknesses are, and so teams capitalized on it. Simple.
I don't see it that way. I think he suffered a concussion in that game. He suffered multiple concussions throughout the season, which hindered his play. Tua, without the concussions, is easily cracking over 30 touchdowns. What did he end up finishing with? 3,500 yards. He's cracking 4,000 yards. Keep in mind, going into last season, you were more concerned about whether or not he can get him the ball. He can get guys like Tyreek Hill the ball.
Oh, I still am.
Waddle.
I still am.
I don't understand how you're still concerned about that.
I still am. Wait, what?
Because Tyreek Hill was on pace for 2,000 yards.
They were making
Tua got healthy.
But Tua,
Tua got hurt.
I feel like we're not even watching the same plays because Tua is leaving these throws short. These are the guys that are making the plays on the ball. Tua is not leaving the ball where it's ahead of them. These guys are the ones that are making the ball. And, of course, they're yak wide receivers. Literally, if you throw a short to these guys, they're going to take it to the curb because of how explosive they are. It's not like Tua is doing some sort of impressive.
Let's not use that yak argument.
It's true.
When it comes to a guy like Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is running that go route. He's going to beat any DB in front of him. He's going to hit by the safety.
He's a yak guy.
Tua is getting him the ball. But what do you mean? Yeah, the ball's 60
No,
yards down
we're
the
not.
field.
We're not gonna say. We're not saying here and saying
Jalen Waddle, I'll give you. He'll take a 5-yard pass and go 60 yards.
it's the same thing. It's the same thing
But
with Tyreek
Tyreek
Hill.
Hill-
They're about the same thing.
It's literally a bomb, a 65-yard bomb to Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill does the rest.
He's leaving it
Is the
short.
ball a little
He's
bit-
leaving it
is the
short.
ball a little bit short.
Yes.
But
Thank
the ball
you.
is
Thank you.
65 yards already
Thank
here.
you. Thank you. He's leaving it
It's
short.
already here.
His
It's
arm strength.
already here.
His arm strength leaves a lot to desire. His literally leaves it desired. You think about when you see these Tua throws that these are just wide receivers that are making exceptional plays on the ball. Nothing of the throws that are sitting there make you think, wow, Tua had phenomenal placement on that deep pass. No, it's these wide receivers that are making exceptional plays on these balls that Tua is underthrowing them. And I still don't believe in his arm strength and his arm talent. I don't believe Tua in any capacity has a top 15 arm in this league. I do not believe he has probably good placement, sure. In short areas, middle of the field, possibly. But I don't believe in his deep accuracy. I don't believe in his processing. I just don't see it with Tua and his ability to elevate this offense. I just do not see it. We're going to sit here and talk about, well, the stats look great and all. The stats, what happened to the stats in the second half of the season? What happened to the stats in the second half?
He has Tyreek Hill on pace for a 2,000-yard season. If my quarterback is getting my receiver close to 2,000 yards, he must be doing something right. There shouldn't be nothing wrong.
Where were the stats at the second half of the season? That's my question mark. You're gonna keep using that.
He suffered concussions.
There it is. Man.
I honestly don't know why we're not just addressing that. Like it's the honest truth. Yeah, he suffered 2 concussions that came out on the reports, but then you add in a 3rd concussion in that Buffalo Bills game at home where he checked out and then he ended up checking back in. But 2 concussions on paper, 3 if you want to add that Buffalo Bills game. That changed everything for the season for Tua. Like that's unheard of. Somebody suffering 3 concussions in one season, and he wasn't even able to clear concussion protocols until about a month and some change after the season ended. So it's just like obviously he was suffering a concussion for majority of that back half of the season. There's no way his play falls off from what it was in that first 3 weeks of the season up until the end of the season. There's just no way.
That's very much possible. That's very much possible.
Teams were already struggling to stop this offense. Tyreek Hill was going crazy. Jalen Waddle was going dumb, and the defense was doing his job.
In those 4 games, in that stretch from when he played San Francisco, Los Angeles, Buffalo, and Green Bay, these were Tua stats. He had 984 yards in about 4 games. He had 6 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. His passer rating took a massive hit. His completion percentage was absolutely terrible. I'm not going to sit here and bail him out and say he had a concussion. In the first half of that Green Bay game, he was playing good. Second half, he wasn't good because he made bad choices. He was overthrowing wide receivers. That is not an individual who had a concussion. That is somebody who could not make those throws. Simple as that. That's how I view it.
There's no way somebody that's 9 for 12, 229 passing yards, and averaging 19 yards per attempt and has 1 touchdown just falls off that massively to throw less than 100 yards, less than 80 yards, and have no touchdowns and 3 interceptions. There's just no way. You can't just say adjustments were made and Tua struggled that heavily. Like that's impossible. You cannot go as far as to say the adjustments were the reason he struggled. Like that's actually insane to say.
Why not? Why are we talking like Tua's elite? Why are we talking like Tua cannot be adjusted to?
No,
what in the world? I don't care. Yes, we know there's Jalen Waddle. We know there's Jalen Waddle. We know there's Tyreek Hill. We understand
exactly.
that. We understand that. Tua is not an elite quarterback. He can be adjusted towards. He's not somebody who we can see and be
you can adjust to any quarterback, though. That argument of adjustment.
It's harder. It's harder when they're elite. It's harder when they're elite. Is it not? Is it harder when it's elite? It
is harder when it's elite, but adjustments can be made across the board to anybody, though. It doesn't matter.
And that's what happened to him. And that's what happened.
Let's go ahead and take a little bit of a step back to those 5-6 games where they lost in a row. Starting off with San Francisco, Niners are a good team. Bad game for Tua. It is what it is. 295 passing yards. He wasn't great in that game. We all know he wasn't great in that game against some Chargers as well. Buffalo. I mean, he finished with 234 passing yards. Jalen Waddle had about 114 of those. All right, game, but it was still a very close game. I'm not counting any game after that because in that Green Bay game, it was night and day. New England was after that, which was 23-21. He didn't even play in that game. So that was the last game we saw Tua play up until literally. So it was literally a 4-game stretch. 2 of those games were like out of the normal because there was the Niners and the Chargers. Fine. Buffalo could have gone either way. And then Green Bay, he had the game in his hands in one half. The concussion happened. Things went south. So it's just like, I don't understand like the doubt. If you came here and said, yeah, okay, the reason why I have the Miami Dolphins finishing here is because of Tua's injury concern. Yeah, I would go as far as to say, I would go as far as and agree with you. I wouldn't have any issue. But for you to still question his play after what he did last season to start off the year,
100%.
where he started off the season what 3-0, what New England. We're not gonna go crazy over that game. Baltimore coming back from being down 28, 6 touchdowns, 469 passing yards. I think Hill and Waddle combined for 180 yards each.
About 3 blown coverages, but anyways, continue on.
That's 20. That's a 28-point deficit. Blown coverages are not.
Coverage, anyways, yes.
That game was dead in the water in the fourth quarter. Tua stepped up his play. It's just I'm calling it how it is. I don't think it's fair for people to continue to question Tua's ability as a quarterback because, like I said, the conversation to start off when he got a guy like Tyreek Hill, well, he doesn't have the arm strength. He's not going to get him the ball. These guys aren't going to be good. Next thing you know, Tyreek Hill is on pace for 2,000 yards, on pace for something that he was never on pace on when he had a guy like Patrick Mahomes under center, the best quarterback.
Well, then does that make you question? Does that make you question? Then if he was that means nothing. Just because a quarterback can have a player on pace doesn't necessarily mean that they're some sort of great quarterback or they're a particularly good quarterback. If Tyreek Hill wasn't able to do that, Patrick Mahomes, that's not an indictment on Patrick Mahomes. It could just
not
be
at all.
Exactly. So it doesn't necessarily mean that because Tyreek Hill is on pace for 2,000 yards, that must mean no. It could just speak volumes of how talented of a wide receiver that Tyreek Hill is. Same thing with Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson. We're not gonna sit here and say, well, Kirk Cousins must be this elite quarterback because Justin Jefferson got 1,800 yards. No, we're gonna say how much of a talented wide receiver Justin Jefferson is for constantly getting open. Same thing with Tyreek Hill. And you just admitted that yes, this was leaving something, short. Yes, that's literally what I'm talking about. I don't believe this team it's my argument simple. I don't believe this team is a Super Bowl contender because of the guy that is sitting under center, and that's Tua. I don't believe that this guy has the capability of going toe-to-toe with these other great quarterbacks. I feel like you need an elite quarterback to win a Super Bowl. He's not a Patrick Mahomes. He's not a Josh Allen. He's not a Justin Herbert. He's not a Trevor Lawrence. He's not an Aaron Rodgers. In fact, he's not a top 8 quarterback. So I don't believe he's not a Lamar Jackson. He's not Joe Burrow. I can keep going on. So he's not in that tier of quarterback. So I don't believe that he can win Super Bowl just because of who is under center. That's my argument.
Your major concern coming into last season was Tua's ability to get a guy like Tyreek Hill the ball. And Tyreek Hill ended up finishing with 1,700 receiving yards last season. And Tua missed a handful of games. You're telling me if Tua doesn't miss those games, he's not touching 2,000 receiving yards?
Potentially, he probably
does. And having his best season ever as a receiver?
He probably does.
That argument, we can go back and forth on it all day about Tua's ability or not. I just feel like I think he's done enough job at just stopping this discussion as a whole. Whether or not you want to, make that argument, whether he's a leader or not, that's fine. That's a conversation that you can have, and people can discuss that and debate that as they want. But I'm not sitting here and saying he's an elite quarterback. But I do believe Tua has what it takes to make these guys Super Bowl contenders, along with everything else they have on their roster on both sides of the ball. Like they got a guy like Jalen Ramsey. They traded for him to add to their defense. Their defense was solid. Their offensive line still probably has a little bit of issues. Their running game didn't necessarily rely heavily on their running game because of their passing attack and how good their skill positions are with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek. And so if Tua is just able to stay healthy, I mean, these guys were the same team that were able to compete with this Buffalo Bills team that we're calling contenders. I mean, they had Skylar Thompson under center. Their defense played their asses off that game. And they were just able to lose by, I think, by like one score, 1 or 2, less than like about 10, 2-score game, about 10 points max, if I remember correctly. So if Tua is able to just stay healthy and continue to elevate his play each and every week, exactly how he was doing last year before he got injured, I think it's fair to say these guys are contenders in the AFC with how stacked it is, just because of how much talent they have on both sides of the ball. But for Tua, the argument can go back and forth all day. But I'll go ahead and rest my case over there.
Record a new hit, then we making us a film. Wouldn't sign a deal if I got a couple mil. Been in the lab, now they throwing out deals. Me and now Lakes, now that's overkill.